I still have the clip on my phone. I don't watch it anymore, but I can't delete it either, and I've stopped trying to explain to myself why both of those things are true at the same time. It's 9 seconds long. It shows me, in my work jacket, walking out the front doors of the building and turning left toward the lot. The timestamp in the corner says 8:02, and I know, not think, know, that at 8:02 that night I was still upstairs on the 3rd floor, because I didn't leave the building until almost 9:10, and I have a reason to be sure of that, which I'll get to. The part that bothers me isn't that the timestamp is wrong. Timestamps drift. Cameras lag. I told myself that for a long time. The part that bothers me is the way the man on the footage pauses at the door, the way he holds it for half a second longer than you'd need to, like he's listening for something behind him. I don't do that. I've never done that, and I've watched myself on those cameras hundreds of times, but I'm getting ahead of it. Let me back up, because the timestamp wasn't the first thing. It was just the thing I couldn't argue with. I worked nights at a place I'm not going to name, mostly because it still exists and people still work there, and I don't want to be the reason somebody quits. My job was building services. I'd describe it as glorified caretaking. I handled the after-hours stuff, resetting the HVAC, doing a walk of the floors, making sure the cleaners locked up behind themselves, killing the lights that the day staff always left burning. I had a little office in the basement near the loading dock, and I had access to everything. Every door, every floor, the camera system, all of it ran through a console down there. I liked the job, honestly. I'm not a people person. I like quiet. I like routine. And there's a specific kind of peace in being the only living thing in a building that's designed to hold a few hundred. You learn its sounds, the way the pipes tick when the heat cycles down, the hum the vending machines make on 4. You learn it so well that anything out of place stands out like a wrong note in a song you've heard 1,000 times. So when I tell you the first thing I noticed was small, I want you to understand that small is the whole point. Small is all you get at first. It was the chair on the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor was sales, an open-plan space, rows of desks. Every night I did my walk, I'd pass through it, and every night it looked the same. Chairs pushed in, monitors off, that blue glow from the standby lights. And one night, maybe 3 weeks before the camera thing, there was a chair pulled out. Just one. Pulled out and turned slightly, angled toward the window, the way you'd leave it if you'd been sitting in it, looking outside, and then got up. Somebody worked late. Somebody forgot to push their chair in. I pushed it in myself and kept walking. I want to be clear that I'm not the kind of person who sees a chair and thinks ghost. I thought messy coworker. That's the only thing a reasonable person thinks. But it was there again the next night. Same chair, same angle. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. I'd pushed it in. I remember the resistance of the wheels on the carpet, that little catch they do. So either somebody pulled it out again the next day and left it the exact same way, or I was misremembering, or the day staff had a habit I didn't know about. I went with the day staff explanation. I pushed it in again. I even said something out loud, which I do when I'm alone, something like, "All right again." The way you'd talk to a dog that keeps stealing the same sock. The 3rd night I left it. I'm not proud of that. I just didn't want to think about it. I walked through, I saw it pulled out and angled at the window, and I decided it wasn't my problem, and I kept moving. I think part of me already didn't want to know why. Now, around the same time, there was the badge thing, and I didn't connect them at first. I want to stress that. I didn't connect anything for weeks. That's how this works. And by then you're already standing inside it. The badge thing was this. Every door in the building logged entries. You tapped your badge, it opened, it kept a record. I almost never looked at the logs. There was no reason to, but part of my end-of-shift routine was running a quick system check on the console, and the access log was one of the tabs, and one night the screen was just left on that tab when I sat down. Probably because I'd been poking around in it for some unrelated reason the night before. And there was an entry on the 4th floor stairwell door, 3:40 in the morning, the night before. My badge. I was not in the building at 3:40 the night before. I finished at 11, like always, and I drove home, and I was asleep by midnight. I'm a creature of habit. I do not deviate. There is no version of that night where I'm tapping into the 4th floor stairwell at 20 to 4 in the morning. My first thought was that the system clock was wrong, same as I'd later think about the camera. My second thought was that somebody had cloned my badge, which is a real thing that can happen, and that thought actually scared me more than anything supernatural would have, because a cloned badge means a person who wanted into the building at night and didn't want it traced to themselves. That's a normal, human, criminal explanation, and it terrified me in a way the chair never had. So I did the responsible thing. I reported it. I told the facilities manager, a guy named Dev who I got along with fine, and Dev said he'd look into it, and a few days later he told me the log had a known glitch, that the timestamp server sometimes duplicated old entries, and that I shouldn't worry about it. He showed me a maintenance ticket from another building in the same management group with the same problem. It was a real ticket. It looked legitimate. I felt stupid for raising it. And I want to pause here because this is important to how the whole thing went. Every single time I found something, there was an explanation waiting for me. Not a forced one, a good one. The chair, messy co-workers. The badge, a documented software glitch. The camera, later, timestamp drift. Each explanation was sitting right there, reasonable and ready, like it had been left out for me to find. And I took every one of them, because that's what a sane person does. You don't build a conspiracy out of a pulled-out chair. But I started checking the logs every night after that. I told myself it was just diligence. It wasn't. I knew it wasn't. For about a week, nothing. Clean logs. Chair behaved itself. Somebody on day staff must have gotten the message, or the angle of the light changed, I don't know. I started to relax, and that's roughly when I noticed the smell. It was on the 3rd floor, in the corridor near the east meeting rooms. A faint smell, the kind you almost don't register, kind of stale and warm, the way a room smells when a person's been sitting in it for a long time with the door closed. Body warmth and breath, basically. You know that smell. You walk into a small meeting room after a long meeting, and it's there. Except these rooms were empty. Had been empty for days. The 3rd floor was half occupied even during the day. The company was downsizing. Empty. Chairs in place. That dead air stillness that unused rooms get. But the smell was strongest right outside the last one. And when I put my hand flat on the door, just stood there with my palm on it like an idiot, I had the distinct and stupid feeling that the room on the other side was not as empty as the room I was standing in. I can't explain that better than to say the silence had a different quality to it. Quiet rooms are quiet. This room was being quiet. There's a difference, and your body knows it before your brain will admit it. I didn't open the door. I want to be honest about that too. I told myself I'd already checked it, that there was no point, and I walked back to the elevator a little faster than I normally would, and I noticed I was walking faster, and I made myself slow down, because some part of me felt that walking fast was an admission. Like if I hurried, I was agreeing that there was something to hurry away from. That was a Thursday. I'm sure of that, because the cleaners came Thursdays, and I had to let them out, and that night when I let them out, the foreman, an older guy named Marco, asked me a question I've thought about more than almost anything else in this whole thing. He asked me if I'd been smoking on the 3rd floor. I told him no, I don't smoke, never have. And he kind of looked at me, and he said he'd smelled something up there, near the east meeting rooms, and that one of his guys wouldn't go back in to do that corridor. Wouldn't say why, just refused, and Marco wasn't going to fight him over it. And then Marco said the thing. He said, "There's somebody using that floor at night. I keep finding it warm. I keep finding it warm." I asked him what he meant, and he just shrugged. In that way people do when they've decided not to care, because caring costs too much. And he said the meeting rooms were warm sometimes when they shouldn't be, like the heat from a person who'd just left, and he'd stopped thinking about it. He said it the same way I'd stopped thinking about the chair. We were both doing the same thing. I realized later. We were both handing the problem to each other and hoping the other guy would take it. After they left, I went down to the console and I pulled the camera feeds for the 3rd floor. This is where I have to explain the cameras, because they matter. There were cameras in the main corridors of every floor and in the stairwells and at the entrances, but not inside the meeting rooms or the offices. Privacy, obviously. So I could see who went into a room, but not what they did in it. I pulled up the 3rd floor east corridor for that night, and I scrubbed back through it, and the corridor was empty the whole time. Nobody went in, nobody came out. The meeting room doors stayed shut. I watched the entire evening at high speed, from when the day staff left to the moment I appeared in frame doing my walk, and there was no one. The corridor was dead, except the timestamp jumped. I almost missed it. The footage ran smooth, the timestamp ticking up in the corner, and then at 7:46, it went to 7:51. 5 minutes, gone. Not corrupted, not glitchy, just absent. The frame before was the empty corridor. The frame after was the empty corridor. Same lighting, same everything. If you weren't watching the numbers, you'd never know. 5 minutes had simply been removed, cleanly, like someone had reached into the recording and pinched it shut. Now, footage gaps happen. Storage fills, the system drops frames. There are 100 boring technical reasons. But I checked the other floors for the same window, 7:46 to 7:51, and they were all intact, continuous. Only the 3rd floor east corridor had the gap. Only the floor with the smell, only the floor that Marco kept finding warm. I sat with that for a long time, and I did something I'm still not sure was smart. I didn't tell Dev, because Dev had an explanation for everything, and I didn't want one this time. I wanted to actually know. I think that's the moment I crossed over from a guy who works in a building to a guy who's investigating it, and I didn't notice myself crossing, the same way you don't notice the exact moment a room gets dark. I started keeping my own notes, times, dates, what I found, chair, badge, smell, the warm rooms, the gap. Written down, it looked unhinged. Written down, it also looked like a pattern. Both things were true. The pattern was real, and I also could not show it to a single other person without sounding like I'd lost it. And there's a specific loneliness to that, to knowing something is wrong and having no way to make it real to anyone else. The next few nights, I changed my route. Small thing. Instead of doing the floors top to bottom like I always had, I did them in a different order, and I varied the times. I told myself it was to catch whatever it was off guard, but if I'm honest, it was because I'd developed a feeling that my routine was known, that the chair and the smell and the warm rooms were always there when I arrived, never while I was watching, and that meant whatever it was understood my schedule. And the way you mess up someone who knows your schedule is you change it. For 2 nights, nothing. Which I now think means I'd succeeded in surprising it. Though that's a thought I don't like to sit with. Everyone was gone, but the whole east wing was lit up, the overheads humming, and I stood at the end of the corridor and felt my stomach drop in a way it hadn't yet. Because lights are different. A chair is passive. A smell is passive. Lights mean a switch was thrown. Lights mean a hand. I called out. I don't know why we do that, announce ourselves to the thing we're afraid of, but I did. I said hello, said it was building services, said the floor was supposed to be closed. My voice sounded thin and wrong in the corridor. Nobody answered. The lights hummed, and I made myself walk down that corridor, checking every office, because it was my job, and because if I didn't, I knew I'd lie awake wondering, and the offices were all empty, every one, lit and empty, until I got to the end, where the 4th floor stairwell door was. The same stairwell door my badge had supposedly opened at 3:40 in the morning. And the door was propped open, with a chair, pulled from somewhere, wedged under the push bar so the door couldn't latch. I know how this sounds, but I need you to understand the specific quality of the fear, because it wasn't a scream and run fear. It was quieter and worse than that. It was the fear of realizing that something had been happening for a long time, all around me, every night, in the building I thought I knew better than anyone, and that I'd been walking through the middle of it, congratulating myself on how well I understood the place. The building hadn't been empty. I'd been the one thing in it that believed it was. I didn't go into the stairwell. I pulled the chair out, let the door latch, and I left the lights on. I left them on. I didn't want to be the one to make the floor dark, and I went down to the console, and I pulled the 4th floor footage for that night, because I needed to see who turned the lights on. The footage showed the corridor going bright at 7:55. The switch was at the far end, out of frame, so I couldn't see the hand. But here's what I could see. At 7:55, the lights come on, the corridor is empty, and then, for the next hour, the corridor stays empty and lit. Nobody comes, nobody goes. And then at 9:04, I appear, walking down it, checking the offices, exactly as I remembered. There was no one else on that footage. The lights turned on by themselves, as far as the camera was concerned. Which is impossible. The switch is manual. Somebody had to be standing right there. But the only person the camera ever showed on that floor was me. And that's when I started checking the entrance cameras. Not the floors, the doors. Because I'd had a thought I didn't want to have, which was that maybe the reason I never saw anyone on the floor footage was that I was looking for the wrong person. Maybe I should look at who came in and who went out and count. So I pulled the main entrance feed for that whole night, and I watched it from the afternoon, when the day staff started leaving, and I counted everyone who walked out those front doors. And I counted everyone who walked in, and the building, by the time I started my shift, should have had exactly one person in it. Me. I watched the day staff leave in their 2s and 3s. I watched the last few stragglers go around 6:30. I watched the cleaners arrive at 7. I watched at 7:48 myself arrive, which was right, that's when I got in. And then I watched the cleaners leave at the end, and I watched myself leave at the very end, last one out, locking up. And there was one extra person. I went through it 3 times. I'm good with this stuff. I'm careful, and I counted 3 times, and the number was the same every time. One more person went out of that building than ever came into it. The exits didn't match the entrances by 1, which is not possible. You can't leave a building you never entered unless you were already inside it. Unless you'd been inside it the whole time, before the cameras started recording that day, before the day staff arrived, before any of us, sitting in a mothballed meeting room on the 3rd floor that smelled like someone had been breathing in it, waiting for the building to fill up and empty out so you could have it to yourself. And then I found the clip of myself leaving at 8:02, the one I still have on my phone. I'd been so focused on counting that I almost didn't register it the first time. There I was, in my jacket, walking out the front doors at 8:02, pausing, holding the door that half-second too long, listening. And I knew that at 8:02 I was upstairs, because at 8:02 I was on the 3rd floor, standing outside that last meeting room with my hand flat on the door, deciding not to open it. That's the reason I'm sure of the time. That's the thing I told you I'd get back to. I have a clear, specific memory of where I was, and it is not walking out the front doors. So I watched the man in my jacket walk across the lot on the exterior camera, and I watched him get to the edge of the frame, where the lot meets the street, where the light from the building gives out, and he stopped. And he turned around, and he looked back at the building. The footage is too far and too dark to see a face. People always ask me that, and the answer is no. I can't see his face. The resolution dies at that distance. He's just a shape in my jacket, standing at the edge of the dark, looking back. But I've watched it enough times to tell you that he wasn't looking at the building generally. The cameras have a fixed position, and you learn the angles, and I can tell you the exact spot he was looking at. He was looking up at the 3rd floor, the east end, the window outside the last meeting room, where I was standing. He was looking at me. I quit 11 days after that. I told Dev the timestamps were unreliable and the count was off, and I showed him the entrance footage, and he watched it, and he went quiet for a while. And then he said, the system must have dropped an entry, that somebody must have come in a side door that wasn't logged, that there was an explanation. There was always an explanation, and he was right that there could be one. That's the thing I can never get past. He could be right. A side door, an unlogged entry, a timestamp glitch on the camera, a coincidence in where the figure happened to be facing. Every single piece has an explanation, and I cannot prove that any of them are wrong. I just know that I worked in that building for 2 years, and I thought I was alone in it every night, and I was so proud of how well I knew it, the ticking pipes and the humming machines, and the whole time the building knew something I didn't. There was a count that didn't add up. There was a chair that wanted to face the window. There was a room that kept itself warm. And there was a man in my jacket who could leave a building I was still standing inside, and who stopped at the edge of the dark to look back up at me. I don't work nights anymore. I don't think I could. But that's not really the part that stayed with me. The part that stayed with me is the count. How many came in? How many are still here? Whether the numbers match. They always do. Of course they do. It's a normal building, full of normal people, and the numbers always match. But I count every time, and I've never once managed to talk myself out of it, because I know now that a building can feel completely empty and not be, that you can be certain you're alone right up until the moment the footage shows you something you'll never be able to explain, and that the worst things don't announce themselves. They pull out a chair, they warm a room, they wait for you to get comfortable, and they learn your schedule long before you ever think to wonder whether something might be learning it. So tonight, when you lock up, wherever you are, your house, your office, wherever you're the last one out, do me one favor, count.